Bomb threats and swatting. At least a half dozen Trump cabinet picks are targeted at their homes. Who's behind these latest attempts to intimidate? And time to talk truce? The president-elect names a special envoy for the war in Ukraine. He says he has a plan to force Putin and Zelensky to the table. Will they listen? And record numbers on the road as a massive storm dubbed an Arctic outbreak sweeps across the eastern half of the country, just in time for what's expected to be record numbers on the road and in the skies for the holiday. All that and more tonight on The Hill on NewsNation. The FBI is investigating. The Speaker of the House calls it, quote, dangerous and unhinged. And the Trump team vows to move forward in spite of a series of threats against Trump cabinet and administration picks, saying, quote, dangerous acts of intimidation and violence will not deter us. The White House condemning the bomb threats and swatting at the homes of almost a dozen Trump picks. The White House says the president has been briefed and Biden officials have been in touch with the Trump team. Hello and good evening. Welcome to Washington. I'm Mike Vaquera, in for Blake Berman. This is The Hill on NewsNation. Well, it's been almost 3 years since Russia invaded Ukraine. Since then, Ukraine has kept Russia's gains to the eastern part of the country, aided by $64 billion worth of American military aid. An estimated 1 million people have died in that war. Today, President-elect Trump took a step to deal with the conflict, naming retired Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg as his special ambassador, saying, quote, we will secure peace through strength and make America and the world safe again. So we're going to start tonight with those threats against Donald Trump and cabinet administration officials. Our Robert Sherman is nearby, the president-elect's home in Mar-a-Lago, with the latest on this developing story. Robert?
Hey there, Mike, and we're tracking multiple incidents here spanning several states coast to coast. Nobody has been hurt in the wake of any of these threats made by those appointees who will soon likely be joining the president-elect's cabinet. But law enforcement, nonetheless, taking all of this very seriously here. This is what Capitol Police had to say today. Said, quote, anytime a member of Congress is the victim of a swatting incident, that's a prank call made to law enforcement, we work closely with our local and federal law enforcement partners to protect ongoing investigations and to minimize the risk of copycats. We cannot provide more details at this time, but we have heard from some of those appointees who have shed some light on what exactly happened to them. One of them, Lori Chavez-DeRemer, who is the president-elect's pick for labor. She says that last night, my family and I were targeted with a pipe bomb threat at our Oregon home. Thanks to the quick response of the local sheriff's office, we are safe. We deeply appreciate their dedication to protecting our community. You've seen several incidents very similar in manner with other appointees. That includes Elise Stefanik, who is the president-elect's pick for ambassador to the UN, Lee Zeldin for the EPA, as well as Brooke Rollins for the Secretary of Agriculture position. The White House has released a statement. They say that the president is aware, he's been briefed, and President Biden unequivocally condemns all threats of political violence. Mike?
Okay, Robert Sherman down at West Palm Beach, thank you very much. And joining us now is NewsNation law and justice contributor and former FBI special agent, Jennifer Coffindaffer. Jennifer, thanks very much for joining us on this Thanksgiving Eve. So what do we know about these threats? You know, we hear a lot about swatting. What is your level of concern?
Mike, thanks for having me. Everybody needs to be concerned because this seems to be a coordinated effort. Look, you have 6 individuals so far. It's in decent time and space in terms of these threats coming in. And that's problematic because it does seem to be very organized. I can tell you the FBI and other federal officials are working overtime to get this solved, and they'll solve it, make no mistake.
Yeah, so you mentioned the FBI investigation. What will this look like? What are the first steps they're going to take into looking into who or how many people even issued these threats and these swatting calls?
Well, they're going to have to do a lot of digital forensic analysis on these phone calls that came in. Good swatters, people who are truly sort of professionals at this, will actually have several layers that are in between the actual call number that came in and the device that they're using. So it's going to be complicated, but it will be able to be solved.
Okay, this is just the latest in a number of threats and outright attacks against Donald Trump and his allies. So let me ask you, is the FBI well positioned to handle this investigation in the current political environment?
Yeah, absolutely. They are a political organization. That is how the street agents are. And they're going to be working, like I said, overtime. I also find it very interesting that the timing of all of this during a holiday time frame, right, where a lot of people are on leave, on vacation, aren't around. That all changes when you have an event like this happen. The FBI will be at full staff trying to tackle this situation.
All right. Jennifer Coffindaffer, thank you very much for joining us on this Thanksgiving Eve. To you, too. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you, Mike. Happy Thanksgiving.
Okay, joining us now, former governor of Wisconsin, Scott Walker. Governor, thanks for joining us. We just spoke with a former FBI agent, as you heard, Jennifer Coffindaffer. Wisconsin was one of several states that received a non-credible bomb threat at polling locations on Election Day. And though the FBI confirmed it was non-credible with threats to Russia, it did stir up a lot of concern. So how concerned are you about this latest round of threats?
Well, it's absolutely outrageous. Doesn't matter, Democrat, Republican, there should be no threats against either current policymakers, be they members of the cabinet, members of the House or the Senate, regardless of party. It's absolutely outrageous. And with that many, it obviously is very concerning. It could be coordinated. But we need to push back in America. We shouldn't have people be intimidated from service, public service, whether it's appointed or elected office.
So far, President-elect Trump has announced nearly all of his administration picks. And now multiple nominees, as we've heard, have been targeted by these bomb threats or swatting threats. The Speaker of the House, Speaker Johnson, says Joe Biden and all Democratic leaders have an obligation to speak up and condemn this now. So let me ask you, Governor, do you have confidence in the FBI's ability? Do you have confidence, we heard Jennifer Coffindaffer, in their ability to get to the bottom of this?
Well, I certainly hope they'll focus, and I think President Biden's statement was appropriate. There needs to be unequivocal denouncement of this. I hope other members of the leadership on both parties, in both the House and the Senate, as well as governors. Governors can be outspoken in this regard as well, particularly in any of the states where we already know of threats. But, I had 100,000 protesters. Protesters are one thing separate from all that, though we had a much smaller number, but we had death threats against me and my family when I served as governor. We know how disconcerting that is. Certainly for someone who's serving in the cabinet, this is not the sort of thing that should be happening right now. You can disagree, but there should never be these sorts of threats.
Right, and you mentioned that, and we all remember those images of protesters at the State House in Madison. In this political environment, how concerned are you that this type of threat seems to be escalating?
Well, again, when you see the kind of names and tactics that are being used in campaigns, I hope now that the campaign is over, we'll see a little bit of that diffuse. But it's one thing to have intense disagreements. When you start using things like Hitler and other things out there, I think that raises a definite red flag. You can talk about policies you disagree with, but it gets to the point where people think they should take action above and beyond the ballot box, and that's not a good thing in any republic like America.
Now, Governor, let me shift gears very quickly here to the nominees themselves. There's obviously been a lot of debate over one in particular, and many of them actually, Pete Hegseth and Tulsi Gabbard, of course. But much of the criticism against those two has come from Democrats. Now some Republicans are unhappy over the president-elect's pick for Labor Secretary Laurie Chavez DeRemer, who was the victim of one of those threats we've heard over the night here. She has a pro-union record. Is the criticism of her fair coming from conservatives?
Well, one, again, whether it's for anybody else prospectively in the cabinet, I denounce, as I mentioned, that those threats. Wouldn't have been my first pick for Labor Secretary, obviously considering my record of taking on the big government union bosses here in Wisconsin and the positive effect it had on education and other things in the state. Having said that, the thing to remember with this pick or any other out there is when you're in the cabinet, you serve at the pleasure of the President of the United States. So he is the one who will set the policy. He's the one who will enact this. Would I prefer someone who maybe's gotten a less of an alignment with organized labor and more with the working men and women of Wisconsin and across the country? Of course I would. But in the end, there's some things about Kennedy, designee of Health and Human Services. There's some things I like about him. There are other things I don't necessarily agree with him on. I hope, though, the policies he enacts and all the rest of them are the policies of President Trump and not necessarily their own personal perspectives.
Well, it's interesting that he did nominate her, given her record. But let me ask you about another set of individuals that the president is going to be relying on. And that, of course, is Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy to reform the government, as they call it. So there's an institute now forming in Wisconsin that's launching its own state project. It would to try to sort of cut back on what many regard as waste, fraud, and abuse, or simply waste in government spending. The Congress has a role to play here. Clearly, the power of the purse. What do you think are the prospects for success for this effort? They're talking about cutting $2 trillion out of a $6.5 trillion budget.
I think it's incredibly exciting. Remember back decades ago, Ronald Reagan put together the Grace Commission. They had incredible ideas, but he unfortunately only had a Republican Senate. He didn't have majorities at any point during his presidency in the U.S. House. He did get things through like massive tax cuts in 81 and 86, but imagine how much more he could have gotten done with the House and the Senate working together. My hope is that you get congressional alliances working together, particularly when they can do budget reconciliation. And then on top of that, as you alluded to, there's a lot they can do on the administrative side of things. Elon Musk in particular, what excitement. The idea, I remember 10 years ago meeting him, and he was just trying to get rockets to land on a barge out in the ocean. Today, he gets it back to the site it took off on. This is a guy who gets things done. I think most of us in America are excited about what he could do to help President Trump with our federal government.
All right. A lot of us are on the edge of our seats to see how successful or unsuccessful this project is. Governor Scott Walker, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
All right. Meanwhile, as the dust settles after a year of war, thousands are heading home today as a ceasefire between Hezbollah and Israel takes effect. Though the deal is set to last just 60 days, many, including President Biden, are hoping that it becomes permanent. NewsNation's Joe Khalil joins us now for the latest. Joe, what is happening in Lebanon now?
So what you're seeing are thousands of people coming back to their homes from the northern part of the country back to the south, close to the border with Israel. And what that is an indication of is that there is some faith that this peace deal may actually be for real and may last more than the 60 days that has been put forth. And actually, you're seeing the same thing on the Israeli side of the border as well. You've got a bunch of people
north.
Yeah, that are going back north to their home. So while, faith in that isn't exactly the biggest indicator yet of, is this going to last or not, it certainly shows that I think people feel like this is in a different place than back in 2006 when they had that.
And we know the situation inside of Lebanon. It's been this way for years. Yeah. Hezbollah operates autonomously. The Lebanese government operates separately from Hezbollah, right. A very uneasy alliance in many cases. Yeah. What does this peace deal say about the relative strength of Hezbollah now, after a year of war, and after what's happened in the course of over the entire Middle East over the course of last year?
Yeah, well, certainly the Biden administration, Israel, both think that Hezbollah has been significantly diminished. You look at their leadership structure, numbers 1, 2, 3, 6, and 7 were all killed, right? So obviously that's going to be a big blow. I think the gamble maybe that the United States is making right now, or at least, from the Biden administration, from sources I'm talking to, they're putting some faith in the Lebanese military, which it's sort of a very, well-known secret that Hezbollah sort of outguns the Lebanese military, right? But that's going to be the one filling the void, hoping to keep stability and peace while Hezbollah fighters are forced north. We'll see what happens.
Very fragile alliance there. Joe Khalil, my man, happy Thanksgiving. Great to see you. Okay. All right. Coming up, actor Mel Gibson thanking NewsNation's very own Elizabeth Vargas after a prisoner exchange frees 3 American hostages from China. Plus, Mick Mulvaney joins us on the other side of the break to discuss some of Donald Trump's latest appointments and why Glenn Youngkin is inviting all Republicans who are moving to town to settle across the Potomac River in Virginia. And we go live from the road on what's expected to be the busiest travel day of the year. I'm Mike Vaquera. The Hill will be back in 4 minutes. Welcome back to The Hill. Today, President-elect Donald Trump added another nominee to his cabinet. Retired Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg was announced as assistant to the president and special envoy to Ukraine and Russia. Kellogg served as chief of staff in Trump's National Security Council from 2017 to 2021. He's also offered suggestions on resolving the conflict in Ukraine and ending the war with Russia. Joining us now is Mick Mulvaney, NewsNation political and economic contributor, former OMB director under the Trump administration. Mick, here's what the president-elect said today on his Truth Social post. Quote, Keith has led a distinguished military and business career, including serving highly sensitive national security roles in my first administration. Okay, Mick, the retired general says he has a plan. Do you think that plan will end up with Russia taking over part of Ukraine that it now occupies after invading that country almost 3 years ago?
I do. And I spent the better part of the last year traveling through Europe and Asia, and folks from all around the world thinks that's probably how this conflict ends. There's a very, very small chance Russia takes over all of Ukraine, almost a 0% chance that Ukraine gets all of its territory left. Small options like escalation or a forever war, but it's a 95% likelihood that the Ukraine will end up losing some territory, ceding that to Russia in exchange for closer ties to the West. Everybody I've talked to on both sides of the political aisle think that that's the outcome. The question is just, is it sooner rather than later? And I think with the appointment of Keith Kellogg, it may come sooner.
Okay, General Kellogg has a plan. He enunciated a little while back before he was named to this post or nominated for this post. And that is essentially Ukraine and Russia call a truce, go back to the lines right now, the battle lines as they stand. Ukraine has to stop its fight. If they don't get any more American weapons. If Russia doesn't stop fighting, Ukraine does get more American weapons. And so how likely is Putin to come to the table? And more importantly, how likely is Donald Trump to play hardball with Vladimir Putin?
Oh, Trump can play hardball with anybody. Putin can as well. But I guess the question is this: what better plan is there right now, other than, I guess, doing this forever, which is what I suppose a lot of folks in Europe want to see happen. But I think, again, most reasonable people think this ends with losing some territory to Russia, talk about Ukraine now, in exchange for closer ties to the West. That seems to make some sense. Will it make President Zelensky happy? No. But if you believe media reports, I think polling within Ukraine says that more than half the people now want to see in Ukraine now want to see the war end. So again, if there's a better plan out there, let's hear it. But it seems to me like this is plan A.
Yeah. Okay, Mick, let's talk about some of these bomb threats that we heard about today and swatting incidents, according to multiple nominees to Trump's cabinet. I should say Trump picks for his cabinet. So do you remember any threats like these during your time in the administration? I mean, this seems a very fraught political time when we're seeing this political violence and threats of political violence and intimidation.
Yeah, and it's a sad result of the heightened rhetoric. I mean, if you call somebody Hitler long enough, maybe some crazy people will start to believe you. No, I didn't see this previously. Keep in mind, for example, when I got named to the cabinet, or at least nominated to the cabinet, I didn't get any protection whatsoever until after I was confirmed. Yeah. And then it was very, very low until I was chief of staff. So most of these folks have absolutely no security whatsoever. We didn't see this, Michael. We saw, the crazy nut jobs on the internet threatening your family and so forth, right. And you have to turn those over to the FBI. But we never saw anything the likes of pipe bombs at this level.
Well, unfortunately, times have changed. I'm going to take a little lighter note here on our last question, Mick. Take a listen to the Republican governor of Virginia, Glenn Youngkin. He invited Trump's incoming cabinet nominees and picks to opt out of living in D.C. or Maryland and move to Virginia instead.
To the new members of President Trump's administration moving to the area, I want to personally invite you to make Virginia your home. Virginia is right across the Potomac. We offer a great quality of life, safe communities, award-winning schools where parents matter, and lower taxes than D.C. or Maryland.
Oh, come on, man. I've lived in the District of Columbia. I've lived in Virginia. I've lived in Maryland. I was raised in Maryland. I live in Maryland now. I mean, this is a very sensitive topic here in the DMV. What do you think? I mean, Republicans always move to Virginia, though. That's typical.
People vote with their feet, don't they? Look, I wish I had seen the ad back in 2017 because I needed a place to stay when I joined to live when I joined the administration. And I bought a place in the district. I now wish I had bought a place in Virginia. Oh. I like walking to work, but the metro serves just as well. And there's plenty of good metro stops in Virginia. So I encourage the folks who are moving out of Congress, especially living in their office, into the administration to check out Virginia.
All right. Mick Mulvaney, thank you very much, sir. Happy Thanksgiving.
And to you as well, my friend.
All right. There is still much more ahead on the Hill. Millions of Americans are taking planes, trains, and automobiles as we expect record-breaking travel numbers today and over the Thanksgiving weekend. We go live with the latest. Plus, Walmart announces it's rolling back one of their major initiatives in the wake of Donald Trump's impending presidency. We tell you what that is when The Hill on NewsNation returns.
Remarkable women from across the country. 125 trailblazers will be honored with a chance to win $25,000 for the nonprofit of their choice. Nominations open through December 20th. Go to newsnationnow.com to enter a remarkable woman today.
Welcome back to the Hill on News Nation. The Thanksgiving weekend is here, and with it, one of the busiest travel days of the year. Millions of Americans plan to hit the roads in the coming days and the skies, and lower gas prices could be the driving factor. Throw in a cold snap and storms across much of the East, and things could get very interesting for holiday motorists. News Nation's Alex Capriello is currently driving in the Chicago suburbs, and he joins us live. Alex, what's the situation there in Chicagoland?
Yeah, Mike, this has been my reality all day long, like the other millions of Americans that are hitting the road. It's bumper-to-bumper traffic here just outside Chicago. We're heading east on I-90, heading towards downtown, and typically this area gets congested just because this is the main way between the airport and downtown, but like this is particularly congested, nearly bumper-to-bumper, and we're going to be sitting in this for at least another hour or so. But really, this is the reality for so many Americans out there that are heading home for the holidays. Some 72 million-ish will be driving this Thanksgiving, and so we're expecting to see a lot of congestion, particularly in those major metros like Chicago. Let's take a look at two others.